and my home is an unusual home because it is filled with materials that I see having potential, and the way my workshop and studio are constructed, I have lots of materials in close juxtaposition, and sometimes it's the juxtaposition of the materials that suggests the new instrument. Now, I'll give you an example of this, how it happened, not exactly in the home, but in the houseware section of a thrift store. There was a beautiful silver, actually stainless steel bowl about this size, and had a base on it like that. And right next to it was something that I think was used to protect a candle from falling over, like a thick candle, and creating a fire. So there were these spines that came up. And I looked at it and I thought, I know what I can do with those. So I picked them up, and turning the bowl over, the base of the spiny device actually fit into the base of the bowl. So I bought them, I took them home, and I bolted them together and put a pickup on it. And in 20 minutes, I had a new instrument that I've now been playing for 20 years.
Shmuel, could you please unmute yourself?
Okay. Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I learned here new very interesting things about music and musical instruments. And I want to ask you a question. I understand we can to take all things we have in the home and to become it to musical instruments.
And the question is, do I use items from the home?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think if I understand the question to be, do I use instruments from the home? Yes, and my home is an unusual home because it is filled with materials that I see having potential, and the way my workshop and studio are constructed, I have lots of materials in close juxtaposition, and sometimes it's the juxtaposition of the materials that suggest the new instrument. Now, I'll give you an example of this, how it happened, not exactly in the home, but in the houseware section of a thrift store. There was a beautiful silver, actually stainless steel bowl about this size, and had a base on it like that. And right next to it was something that I think was used to protect a candle from falling over, like a thick candle, and creating a fire. So there were these spines that came up. And I looked at it and I thought, I know what I can do with those. So I picked them up, and turning the bowl over, the base of the spiny device actually fit into the base of the bowl. So I bought them, I took them home, and I bolted them together and put a pickup on it. And in 20 minutes, I had a new instrument that I've now been playing for 20 years. So, super common household items. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. And another question that I have, how, according to your opinion, use different home things for music can support education of young generation, education young people.
How important is music to young people's education? Is that the basic question?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's very important because I think it activates certain parts of the mind that help people understand the world, and it leaves the senses to be, without music education, it leaves the senses that are sound-based and to some degree language-based to commercial activities, which basically are getting you to buy a value or a product and become enslaved to that process. And I think also it helps you think logically because you learn how to put pieces of things that did not exist before together into sequences. So I think there's a lot to it. And I really enjoy setting up and demonstrating these instruments for children. And what happens is there's, say a group of 5 kids present, you can tell the one that just gravitates toward it. So I always go and stand right next to the parent and say, what kind of instruments do you have at home, to make sure that they get going with that. And I do this work at schools and libraries.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to also tell the participants that all the instruments that Jay makes, it's not just for music. You can tune them to play music, but it's also very important to create soundscapes that can be used for background scores, to fill the emptiness when you're looking at a visual content. There's a lot of Foley sounds that are used generally in any sort of movie or advertisement or anything like that. And a lot of these instruments people generally get fed up of all the music instruments that are conventionally there, and if they are regularly used into background music. So a lot of newfound instruments can fill those sounds with, I'll say, very alienish sounds, very UFO-like sounds, very wind-based sounds. A lot of metallic or watery sounds are used for these Foley sounds. So they fill up the background really well. And all of these instruments, other than playing music, also help you support or create background sounds or Foley sounds. The question was, I think, are you fascinated by, or what do you think about the sound Om?
I mean, it's the kind of thing that I would, when in a group of people meditating with that it is a physical sensation for me, and that I feel like the spiritual aspects of it rise up out of the physical feeling, particularly in the chest and through the sounding cavity. And I don't think about it, I experience it, and that's where I want to get. One thing I failed to mention is that oftentimes when I'm playing, I can shift into a trance state, and it almost always happens. For instance, I was at a conference and I was demonstrating instruments, and somebody had to come up and stop me because I was gone, and that's what I want. And it's like I get it almost every time. So it's like, and it totally relates to that sensation where it's like coming through the body, and in this case, my body's part of it, but the sounds relate to that. That's how it fits for me.
I think I can completely relate to the experience part as well when it comes to the Om sound. Like when we are generally doing it, more than listening to it like music, it's more like feeling the vibration and understanding the sound.
Yeah.
It has a profound effect on the body, especially on the diaphragm and the stomach, and then the diaphragm, and then the throat, and then the head. And yeah, I've too experienced the trance state when I sort of creating sounds along with you, and it is truly magical for anybody who's curious about sound, not just music, but to be very clear, very curious about sound.
So there's just one little question that I'd like to ask. Sir, you mentioned multiple times throughout the webinar that you look at everyday objects and you spot some potential. So I'd like to ask you as to how do you spot that potential? That when it comes to music, I was asking that how do you spot that potential when you look at everyday objects? Like when it comes to music, you can realize that, okay, this note hits well, this does not. But when it comes to creating beats, like how do you figure out? Like does it come from experience or do you use some special knowledge?
Creating beats, or I'm not sure exactly what the question is. Krishan, can you help me?
How do you find the untapped potential into a particular object? Like how do you figure out, okay, this thing is like this, you can basically turn it into an instrument, because generally when somebody is playing a drum or something, it's created for the purpose of playing percussions. It's tuned in a way so that you can play particular theoretical notes. In this case, when you take up objects from around you, how do you really figure out, okay, I can probably put this, and if I tweak it up a little bit, it'll be on F, or it'll be on D, or it'll be on A.
Right. So what I do is I first physically interact with it, and you walk into a store and you see somebody, or at your flea market, you see somebody holding something up to their ear like this, and you think, what's going on there? Because this is not typically a sounded thing, typically. So I physically play with it and experiment with it, and it's kind of a curiosity made physical. So it's not like I'm sitting there and I think, what could that be? I see it and I consider, could this be something? And I pick it up and see what it suggests. Sometimes it suggests, yes, this could work. Other times it's like, no, it's not active enough to really do that. And then it's a process. So it becomes more formal when I find ways to tune it. Like, these are tunable instruments. And what happens after I've gotten the practice of playing them, sometimes one instrument will lead to another. And I can show you here. So like with this, you see the metal band, right? And at one point I was playing around and I had some little pieces of wood that I put under the metal band on an instrument, just quite a bit like this one. And I discovered that you could hear what was being played behind that bridge as well as what was in front of it in relation to the pickup. So that's how this instrument got developed, which you see has multiple bridges. So with this one, you can play here, and well, the original would only have one pickup, now there are two pickups. But you can then get a whole range of new sounds because you can bend it by pressing on behind the bridges, and everything sounds. And that was just from a loose experiment, which may even have happened during a performance. And oftentimes I'll say that, and it's mostly true, I'm not happy with a performance unless I discover something new during the performance, which is the opposite of a lot of musicians who want to replicate something they practiced and practiced and practiced. For me, I play a lot at home and practice, but my practice is also open enough to lead to accepting the new thing that comes about almost by accident, or it's like, what if I did this? And mostly I can't think when I'm playing except for things like that. And in that state that I described, I can very rarely remember specifics of the whole thing that was performed. I can remember the feel of being there. So that's a long answer to a short question. And I hope it was what you were after.
Thank you, sir. You've answered my question.
Good, thanks.
An important question. Could you please tell us more about the pickups or the piezoelectric pickups that you make generally to enhance the sound? Or how do you generally convert sound from a material into an electronic or a sound that's audible through speakers?
Okay, early on I worked almost exclusively with piezos, and I can show one. So this copper wrapped piece right here is a piezo that I made a pickup that I made myself. If you wanted, you can go and spend $50 or $100 on a piezo. But what I like to do is to go to the electronics market near the Performing Arts Faculty in Baroda and buy a handful of them for 100 rupees, and then wire my and carefully shield them so they don't pick up noise, and test, and then seal it up with some epoxy or something, and then you've got a professional sounding pickup. It's very inexpensive and useful for lots of things. And more lately, I've gone toward, actually the cover's off of this one so you can see it after it's been wrapped with copper. You can see this right here. It's a guitar pickup. And it happens to be that I found some really thin ones. They're about 1/8 and a 1/4 inch thick. And I do this, I also shield those myself. I don't take them I use copper tape to shield them and then mount them. And the beauty of that is they work better without a preamp than a piezo does. Each has their own role, like a magnetic pickup would not work on the string-based instrument.
Thank you.